The knock came at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, right in the middle of my sprint planning meeting with the development team. I had my camera off, half listening to Jake discuss API integration timelines, when I heard it. Not Patricia's usual imperious pounding, but something lighter, almost cheerful. I muted my mic. Sorry, give me 1 second. I typed in the chat and went to answer the door. Patricia stood on the porch in her real estate power suit, navy blazer, cream blouse, the pearl earrings she wore when she wanted to look successful. Next to her was a blonde woman I'd never seen before, holding an iPad and wearing a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. Maya, Patricia said, already pushing past me into the entryway. This is Jennifer Kowalski. She's one of the top agents in the area. We're doing a walkthrough. I blinked, still holding the door. A walkthrough? For what? For the listing, obviously. Patricia's voice had that edge it always got when she thought I was being deliberately stupid. I'm selling the house. The words didn't land at first. They just sort of hovered in the air between us, like I was hearing them through water. You're what? Selling. The house. Patricia enunciated each word slowly, the way you talk to a child. The market's excellent right now, and frankly, it's time I liquidated this asset. Jennifer says we could get $650,000, maybe more with the right staging. Jennifer nodded enthusiastically, already tapping on her iPad. The location is prime, and even with some updating needed, the bones are solid. I'm thinking we could list by next week. But I gestured vaguely at the house around us, at my laptop still open on the dining room table where my meeting was waiting. I live here. Yes, well. Patricia smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her blazer. That's why I'm giving you notice now. 30 days should be plenty of time for you to find other arrangements. You're young, you have a good job, you'll be fine. 30 days. She said it like it was generous, like she was doing me a favor. Patricia, can we talk about this? Privately. I glanced at Jennifer, who was already measuring the entryway with her laser measure, completely unbothered by the conversation happening around her. There's nothing to discuss. Patricia's tone was final, the same tone she'd used my whole life when she'd made a decision and expected obedience. I've been more than generous letting you stay here this long, but it's time you learned to stand on your own feet instead of living off family property. Your grandmother would have wanted you to be independent. Living off family property. The phrase hit like a slap. I'd been paying her $1,200 every month for 2 years. 24 months times $1,200, $28,800. Nearly $30,000 in rent, while she lectured me about being dependent. I've been paying rent, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. And I've been covering the difference between your contribution and the actual costs, Patricia replied smoothly, already following Jennifer toward the living room. Trust me, you've been getting a very good deal. Now, if you don't mind, we need to do measurements and photos. I'm on a work call. This will only take an hour. You can step outside, can't you? It wasn't really a question. I stood there, frozen, as they moved through my home, through my grandmother's home, like I was already gone. Jennifer took photos of every room, commenting on things that would need to be updated. Patricia followed behind, adding her own observations. All this clutter will need to be cleared out, Patricia said, gesturing at my bookshelf in the living room, the one I'd carefully organized by genre. And these personal items. She waved dismissively at the framed photos on the mantel, me and my grandmother at my college graduation, me and my parents before they died, my grandmother's wedding photo. Personal items. As if my entire life was just clutter to be removed before showing. I heard Jennifer's voice from the kitchen. The appliances are dated, but that's an easy fix. Buyers in this price range expect stainless steel. They moved upstairs. I heard their footsteps above me, heard Patricia's voice critiquing the bathroom tile, the outdated light fixtures, the unfortunate wallpaper choices. Every word felt like she was erasing my grandmother from the house, erasing me, turning our home into nothing but square footage and market potential. My laptop chimed, someone from the meeting asking if I was coming back. I closed it without responding. When they finally finished, Jennifer handed Patricia a folder of preliminary comps and staging recommendations. They stood in the entryway, discussing timeline and pricing strategy like I wasn't even there. I'll have the listing agreement ready by Friday, Jennifer said, shaking Patricia's hand. "This is going to move fast." Patricia walked her out, then turned to me with an expression that might have been sympathy on someone else's face. On her, it just looked like pity. "I know this feels sudden," she said, "but it's for the best. You can't hide in this house forever, Maya. You need to build your own life, not cling to the past. Your grandmother would want that for you." She left without waiting for a response, pulling the door shut behind her with a soft, final click. I stood in the silent entryway of the house where I'd lived for 18 years, where my grandmother had lived for 40, and felt something crack inside me. Not break, not yet. Just crack, like ice beginning to give way. 30 days, living off family property. Clutter to be cleared. I'd been paying her $1,200 a month for 2 years while she treated my presence like charity she was graciously providing. I sank onto the bottom step of the stairs and put my head in my hands, trying to breathe through the weight pressing on my chest. Everything around me, the scuffed hardwood floors, the wallpaper Patricia had called unfortunate, the photos she dismissed as clutter, held memories she couldn't see and didn't care about. This was my home, and in 30 days it would be gone. I had no idea where to even start. I started packing that night, not because I had anywhere to go, but because I didn't know what else to do. Patricia had always been in charge, always known better, always won. Fighting her felt as impossible as fighting gravity. I pulled boxes from the garage, the same boxes we'd used when my grandmother moved in 42 years ago, her maiden name still written on the sides in faded marker. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was packing up the life she'd built, the home she'd made for me when I had nowhere else to go, all because her daughter had decided it was time to cash out. The books came down first. My grandmother's collection of poetry, mystery novels with cracked spines, the cookbook she'd used so often the pages were stained and soft. I wrapped each one in newspaper, my tears spotting the print, making the words blur and run. In the kitchen, I stood in front of the cabinet where she kept her teacups, mismatched, collected over decades, each one with a story I could barely remember now. Patricia had walked past these during the showing and said, "All this old dishware can go to Goodwill." Goodwill. Like they were nothing. Like she was nothing. I packed them anyway, wrapping each cup in bubble wrap, even though I had no idea where I'd put them in whatever cramped apartment I could afford on short notice. By the second day, I'd made it to my grandmother's office, the small room at the back of the house that Patricia had barely glanced at during the walkthrough. "Just throw away all that junk," she'd said dismissively. "Old papers, outdated files. Nothing worth keeping." I sat at my grandmother's desk, running my hand over the worn surface where she'd paid bills, written letters, kept the records of a life carefully lived. The desk was old mahogany, heavy and solid, with drawers that stuck slightly when you pulled them. I started with the top drawer. Pens, paper clips, sticky notes with my grandmother's handwriting, reminders about appointments, grocery lists, a note that said Maya's birthday, chocolate cake, not vanilla, from 3 years ago. I pressed it to my chest and cried until my throat hurt. The second drawer held old tax returns, medical bills, receipts organized by year in labeled folders. My grandmother had been meticulous, keeping everything just in case. I sorted through them mechanically, creating piles. Keep, shred, maybe. The bottom drawer stuck worse than the others. I had to pull hard, and when it finally gave way, it came out too fast, nearly spilling its contents onto the floor. More files, more papers, the accumulation of decades of careful record-keeping. I was about to push it closed when I saw the folder wedged in the very back, stuck against the drawer's frame. It was burgundy, thicker than the others, with estate documents, important, written on the tab in my grandmother's precise script. My hands shook as I pulled it free. Inside were papers clipped together in sections, a copy of my grandmother's death certificate, insurance policies, and there, on top of everything else, a document with last will and testament of Rose Marichin printed across the top. I stared at it. Patricia had handled all of this, she'd said. She was the executor, she told me. She'd taken care of everything while I was drowning in grief, and I'd been grateful not to have to deal with it. I started reading. The language was formal, legal, hard to parse through at first. But certain phrases jumped out, clear and unmistakable. I leave my home at 4782, Maple Grove Avenue, to my beloved granddaughter, Maya Lin Chen, along with all contents therein. I read it again. Then again. The house was left to me. Not to Patricia. To me. My hands were shaking, so badly, I almost dropped the papers. I kept reading, scanning through the sections, looking for anything that mentioned Patricia, any clause that would explain why she told me the house was hers to sell. There was nothing. She wasn't the executor. That was someone named Robertson from Chun and Associates, a law firm downtown. She wasn't even mentioned except as my daughter Patricia in a section about a small financial bequest already distributed. At the bottom of the document was a business card, paper-clipped to the final page. Robert Chun, estate attorney, with a phone number and email address. I sat back in the chair, the will still clutched in my hands, and tried to make sense of what I was reading. My grandmother had left me the house. 2 years ago, she'd left me this house. And for 2 years, I'd been paying Patricia $1,200 a month in rent for a house that was legally mine. I pulled out my phone and did the math I'd already done in my head a dozen times since Tuesday. $1,200 times 24 months. $28,800. $28,800. Paid to my aunt for permission to live in my own house. I read the will again, looking for any possibility that I was misunderstanding, that there was some legal complexity I was missing, some reason Patricia would have been telling the truth. But it was clear, unambiguous. The house, the property, everything left to me. I thought about Patricia standing in the entryway with Jennifer, discussing staging and listing prices. Thought about her saying I'd been living off family property, that she'd been generous letting me stay. Thought about every monthly rent payment, every lecture about being independent, every time she'd made me feel like a burden she was graciously tolerating. My aunt had been lying to me about everything. She'd been lying and stealing, and I'd been so deep in grief and so conditioned to defer to her authority that I'd never questioned it, never asked to see documents, never wondered why there was no formal lease, no receipt for the rent, nothing but her word that this was how things were. I sat in my grandmother's office, surrounded by half-packed boxes and the evidence of a fraud I still couldn't quite believe, and felt something shift inside me. Not grief this time. Not helplessness. Rage. Cold, clear, clarifying rage. I picked up my phone and took photos of every page of the will. Then I found Robert Chen's business card and sent an email before I could talk myself out of it. Mr. Chun, my name is Maya Chen. I believe you were the executor of my grandmother Rose Marie Chen's estate. I need to speak with you urgently about her will and the property at 4782 Maple Grove Avenue. My Aunt Patricia has been telling me she owns this house. According to the will I just found, that's not true. Please call me as soon as possible. I hit send and sat back, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Patricia wanted to sell my house, wanted to evict me from my own property, had been stealing from me for 2 years while treating me like charity. She was about to find out she'd picked the wrong person to lie to. Robert Chin called me back within 2 hours. Miss Chun, I got your email, he said, his voice careful, professional. I have to admit, I'm confused and concerned. Can you tell me exactly what's been happening with the property? I was still sitting at my grandmother's desk, the will spread out in front of me like evidence at a crime scene. My Aunt Patricia told me she was handling the estate. She said I could stay in the house temporarily if I paid her rent, $200 a month. I've been paying her for 2 years, and now she's selling the house. She gave me 30 days to move out. The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Miss Chun, Robert finally said, his voice tight, your aunt is not the executor of your grandmother's estate. I am. And according to the will I drafted and filed with the probate court 2 years ago, you are the sole beneficiary of the property at 4782 Maple Grove Avenue. You've been the legal owner since the estate cleared probate 6 weeks after your grandmother's death. The room tilted slightly. Hearing it confirmed by a lawyer made it real in a way the document alone hadn't. So the rent I've been paying her was theft. His voice hardened. If you've been paying your aunt for a property you legally own, that's fraud. Possibly multiple counts, depending on how she represented herself. Did she provide any documentation? A lease agreement? Receipts? No, nothing. She just told me the amount and I paid her. Every month. Through Venmo. Good. That's documentation. I heard typing on his end. Miss Chun, I need you to forward me every Venmo payment, every text message, every email exchange with your aunt regarding this property and these payments. And I need to know, did she ever claim to be the executor? Did she ever show you any legal documents? I thought back to those first horrible weeks after the funeral, everything blurred by grief. She said she was handling everything. She made it sound official. I was so overwhelmed, I just believed her. That's what she was counting on. More typing. I'm going to be frank with you. What your aunt has done is a serious crime. She's collected nearly $30,000 from you under fraudulent pretenses. She's attempted to sell property she doesn't own. If she's forged any documents or misrepresented herself as executor, that adds additional charges. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from shock. It was adrenaline, pure and electric. What happens now? Now, I contact the probate court and the district attorney's office. I'll need you to come to my office tomorrow to give a formal statement and sign some documents. And Miss Chun, his voice softened slightly. Stop packing. That's your house. You're not going anywhere. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my grandmother's office, my office, and looked at the boxes I'd already filled. My books wrapped in newspaper. My grandmother's teacups cushioned in bubble wrap. Evidence of my own acceptance that I had no power, no right to stay. I wasn't living in her house. She was stealing from mine. I stood up and started unpacking. Patricia came by 3 days later with another couple, this time without warning. I heard her key in the lock, the key I'd given her 2 years ago for emergencies, and heard her voice in the entryway before I even made it downstairs. As you can see, the bones are excellent, she was saying. Original hardwood throughout, and the layout is very functional. I appeared at the top of the stairs in my pajamas, coffee cup in hand. Patricia's smile tightened when she saw me. Maya, I texted you we'd be showing the property at 10. Must have missed it, I said, taking a slow sip of coffee. I hadn't missed it. I'd screenshotted it and forwarded it to Robert Chun with the timestamp. I'll just be in my room. I watched from the upstairs hallway as they toured, my phone recording audio in my pocket. Patricia pointed out the dated fixtures and cosmetic updates needed, her voice carrying that same dismissive tone she'd used with Jennifer. When they got to the living room, she gestured at my bookshelf. All the personal belongings will be cleared before closing, of course. I added it to the running document I'd started. Date, time, what she said, who witnessed it. Robert had told me to document everything. So I did. That evening, my cousin Michelle called. Mom says you're moving? Where are you going? I kept my voice neutral. Still figuring that out. She got such a good price, though. $675,000. She's so smart with real estate. Michelle's admiration was painfully genuine. She said she'll help you find an apartment if you need it. That's generous of her, I said, the words tasting like ash. At work the next day, my coworker Jordan noticed I'd been distracted. When I finally told him the basics, not the fraud, just the eviction, he pulled up tenant rights on his laptop. Even if she owns it, she can't just kick you out with 30 days' notice, he said, scrolling through state housing laws. And she definitely can't let herself in whenever she wants. That's illegal. Everything she's doing is illegal, I said quietly. Jordan looked at me sharply. What do you mean? I almost told him, almost explained the whole thing. But Robert's words echoed in my head. Don't tip her off. Let her keep digging. It's complicated. 2 days later, an envelope arrived via certified mail. Official eviction notice, printed on legal letterhead, giving me 30 days to vacate the premises at 4782 Maple Grove Avenue. Patricia's signature at the bottom, bold and confident. I photographed every page and sent them to Robert. His response came within minutes. Perfect. She just committed this to writing. Can you come in Friday at 2? I met him in his downtown office, a space that smelled like leather and old books. He had my grandmother's will laid out on his desk next to printouts of every Venmo payment, every text message, every photo I'd taken. She's showing the house to buyers, I said. She's accepted an offer. She's planning a family dinner to celebrate. Robert leaned back in his chair, his expression somewhere between anger and satisfaction. Let her celebrate. The higher she climbs, the further she'll fall. We're filing with the DA's office next week, but I want to wait until she's fully committed to the sale. The more evidence of intent, the stronger the case. So I just keep letting her do this. You document everything and you wait. When we're ready, we'll pull the floor out from under her. He met my eyes. Can you do that? Can you be patient? I thought about my grandmother, meticulous and careful, keeping every receipt, every record, teaching me that the quiet ones are the ones you underestimate. Yes, I said. I can be patient. The open house was scheduled for Sunday, 1 to 4 p.m. Patricia called Saturday night to inform me, not ask. You'll need to be out of the house tomorrow, she said. Buyers don't want to see tenants during showings. It makes them uncomfortable. Tenants. I gripped the phone tighter, forcing my voice to stay level. Where am I supposed to go for 3 hours? I don't know, Maya. Coffee shop? Library? Surely you can find something to do. Her impatience was palpable. And make sure everything is tidy. First impressions matter. I spent Sunday morning at a coffee shop 2 blocks away, my laptop open but unseeing, while strangers walked through my home. My phone buzzed periodically with updates I hadn't asked for, Patricia texting photos of the crowd, the sign-in sheet, her barely contained excitement. Great turnout, one message read. Jennifer says we might get multiple offers. I forwarded each one to Robert and ordered another coffee I wouldn't drink. By Monday morning, Patricia had 3 offers. By Tuesday, she'd accepted one, $675, 000, 15,000 over asking. She called me that evening, her voice bright with triumph. I wanted you to hear it from me first, she said. We accepted an offer. $675,000, cash buyer, 30-day close. Everything's falling into place. That's great. The word caught in my throat. And Maya, I've been thinking. Her tone shifted, became magnanimous. I know this has been hard on you. So I'd like to give you something to help with your transition. $5,000. For moving expenses, first and last month's rent, whatever you need. $5,000. Out of the $675,000 she was stealing. Out of the $28,800 she'd already taken. That's very generous, I managed. Consider it my final gift to you. Your grandmother would want me to help you get on your feet. She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. She'd be proud of how you're handling this, you know. Growing up, becoming independent. This is good for you. My hands were shaking so badly I had to put the phone on speaker. I appreciate that, Patricia. I'll have Jennifer coordinate the closing timeline with you. You'll need to be fully moved out by then, of course. But $5,000 should make that easier. After we hung up, I sat on my grandmother's couch, and played back the recording I'd made of the call. Her voice, so confident, so certain she was being benevolent, so completely convinced she'd gotten away with it. I sent the recording to Robert with a message. She offered me $5,000 to help. Out of $675,000. His response came immediately. DA found the forged executor documents in probate files. She submitted them 2 weeks after your grandmother died, claiming sole beneficiary status. We have everything we need. How do you want to do this? I stared at the message, thinking about Patricia's celebration dinner she'd mentioned, the family gathering she was planning for next weekend to toast her success. Thinking about how she'd invited me as an afterthought, so everyone could say goodbye properly. Let her have her dinner, I typed. Let everyone see. 3 dots appeared, then, you're sure? This is going to be brutal. I looked around my living room, at the photos Patricia had called clutter, the bookshelf she'd dismissed, the home she tried to erase. I thought about my grandmother's will, hidden in a drawer, patient and true. I'm sure, I sent back. She wanted an audience for my humiliation. She can have an audience for hers. Robert's response was simple. Friday night, then. I'll make the call during dinner. I sat in the silence of my house and felt something settle in my chest. Not rage anymore. Something colder. Clearer. Patricia truly believed she'd won. She was planning celebrations, accepting congratulations, offering me charity from money she'd stolen. She had no idea she'd already lost. Patricia chose her favorite restaurant, Marcello's, the Italian place with white tablecloths and waiters in bow ties where she took clients to impress them. She'd reserved the private dining room and invited everyone. Uncle James and Aunt Linda, cousins Michelle and David, even her book club friend Barbara, who wasn't family but loved to be included in important occasions. She called me on Thursday. Dinner tomorrow at 7. I'm celebrating the house sale, and I thought the family should be there to say goodbye to you properly. You should come. An afterthought. An obligation. The charity case being given one last meal before being sent on her way. I arrived exactly on time. The private room was already warm with conversation and laughter. Patricia stood at the head of the table in a burgundy dress, holding court with a glass of wine, her face flushed with happiness. Maya. Michelle rushed over to hug me. Mom told us about your big move. It's so exciting, starting fresh. Very exciting, I said, accepting the glass of wine someone pressed into my hand. Patricia waited until everyone was seated, until the appetizers had been ordered, before she began. She stood, tapping her glass with a fork, commanding attention the way she always had. I want to thank you all for being here tonight, she said, her voice carrying that practiced warmth she used for speeches. As you know, I've just completed the sale of my mother's house, a property I've been managing for the past 2 years. It wasn't an easy decision, but sometimes we have to make smart financial choices, even when they're emotionally difficult. Murmurs of agreement around the table. Sympathetic nods. The market was perfect, and I'm proud to say we got an excellent price. $675,000. She paused for the impressed reactions, the congratulations. It's a reminder that real estate is as much about timing as it is about property value. You have to know when to hold and when to sell. Uncle James raised his glass. To Patricia's business acumen. Everyone drank. I held the wine to my lips without tasting it. Patricia's gaze landed on me, and her smile softened into something that might have looked like affection to anyone who didn't know better. And of course, this also means a new chapter for Maya. She's been living in the house since Mom died, and while it's been wonderful having her there, keeping the property occupied, I think this change will be good for her. She's been paying rent, Aunt Linda said. So responsible. Yes, though nowhere near the actual costs, of course. Patricia's laugh was light, dismissive. But that's what family does. We help each other. And now Maya gets to experience true independence. Find her own place, build her own life. It's what my mother would have wanted. For her to stand on her own feet. The table murmured approval. Michelle squeezed my hand sympathetically. Sometimes we enable people by making things too easy, Patricia continued, warming to her theme. Real growth comes from challenge. From learning to survive without a safety net. My phone buzzed in my lap. I glanced down. Robert's message was simple. It's happening. Now. I looked up at Patricia, still talking, still performing, her face radiant with success and self-satisfaction. Still completely convinced she was the hero of the story, teaching her poor dependent niece a valuable lesson about independence. She had no idea her world was about to end. My phone rang. Not mine, Patricia's. The buzzing cut through her speech, loud in the small room. She glanced at her purse, annoyed, clearly planning to ignore it. It rang again. Insistent. Sorry, she said, pulling it out. It might be Jennifer about the closing. She answered with her professional voice, already turning slightly away from the table. Patricia Chun speaking. And then her face changed. The color drained from Patricia's face so quickly I thought she might faint. Her hand tightened around the phone, knuckles going white. I'm sorry, who is this? Her voice had lost all its confidence, gone thin and uncertain. The room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching her now, forks suspended halfway to mouths, conversations dying mid-sentence. Miss Patricia Chun, this is Robert Chun from Chun and Associates. The voice on the other end was loud enough that I could hear it from across the table. Robert had turned up his volume deliberately. I'm the executor of Rose Marie Chun's estate. I'm calling regarding the property at 4782 Maple Grove Avenue, which you've recently attempted to sell. This isn't a good time. Patricia turned further away, her voice dropping to a hiss. I'll call you back. Actually, Miss Chun, this concerns fraud and theft charges, so I prefer we handle this now. In fact, given the nature of these allegations, I think your family should hear this. Could you put me on speakerphone, please? Absolutely not. Patricia's hand was shaking. I don't know what you think. The district attorney's office has requested transparency in these proceedings. You can put me on speaker, or I can have an officer deliver this information in person. Your choice. Uncle James leaned forward. Patricia, what's going on? She looked around the table, trapped, her face cycling through expressions. Confusion, anger, fear. Finally, her hand trembling, she tapped the speaker button and set the phone on the table. Robert's voice filled the room, clear and measured. Miss Chun, can you confirm that you've accepted an offer to sell the property at 4782 Maple Grove Avenue for $675,000? I don't see how that's any of your... Can you confirm it, please? Yes. The word came out strangled. Yes, but I have every right. Actually, you don't. You have no legal claim to that property whatsoever. The house was left to your niece, Maya Chun, in your mother's will. Maya has been the legal owner for 2 years. The silence was absolute. Every eye in the room turned to me, then back to Patricia. That's ridiculous. Patricia's voice cracked. I'm the executor. I handled the estate. You are not the executor. I am. And you're currently under investigation for submitting forged documents to probate court claiming to be the executor and sole beneficiary. You've also collected approximately $28,800 in fraudulent rent payments from the actual owner of the property. Michelle gasped. Aunt Linda's hand flew to her mouth. This is a misunderstanding, Patricia said, but her voice was desperate now, panicked. Maya, tell them. You know I was helping you, managing things. You told me you own the house. My voice cut through her stammering, steady and clear. You told me I was paying rent. You gave me 30 days to move out of my own home. I was protecting you. You weren't ready to handle. The house was never yours to sell, Miss Chun. Robert's voice was relentless. It was never yours at all. The district attorney will be contacting you Monday morning regarding criminal charges. I'd suggest you retain legal counsel. Patricia lunged for the phone, stabbing at the screen to end the call. But it was too late. The truth was out, spread across the white tablecloth like spilled wine. She looked around the table at her family, at Barbara from book club, at all the people she'd gathered to witness her triumph. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. You tried to steal my house, I said quietly. And you made me thank you for it. Patricia tried to recover. She stood, gripping the edge of the table, forcing her face into something resembling composure. This is clearly a misunderstanding, she said, her voice shaking but authoritative. Some miscommunication with the estate lawyer. I've been managing that property for 2 years. Everyone here knows that. Maya, you know I was just trying to help. Help yourself to $30,000. Uncle James's voice was cold. It wasn't like that. Patricia turned to him, desperate. Mother's estate was complicated. I was protecting Maya from all the legal complexity. She was grieving. She couldn't handle. She was grieving. So you lied to her? Michelle stared at her mother like she'd never seen her before. You made her pay rent for her own house? I covered expenses. The real costs were much higher than what she paid. Show us the expenses, I said quietly. Everyone looked at me. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, and held it up so they could see the screen. This is my grandmother's will. The one the lawyer filed with probate court 2 years ago. The one that leaves the house to me. I swiped to the next image. These are the Venmo payments. 24 months. $1,200 each. With notes like, rent for May and June rent. Thanks. Another swipe. This is the fraudulent eviction notice Patricia sent me 2 weeks ago. Patricia's face had gone from white to red, her hands trembling. You're making this sound worse than it is. Family handles things differently than strangers would. You forged documents claiming to be the executor. Aunt Linda's voice was barely a whisper. Patricia, that's fraud. It was a shortcut, to make things easier. But her voice had lost all conviction. You were going to pocket $675,000 from selling my house, I said. You offered me $5,000 out of it and called it charity. The silence that followed was suffocating. Barbara from book club quietly gathered her purse and left without a word. David wouldn't meet his aunt's eyes. Uncle James stood. Linda, we're leaving. Wait. Patricia reached for him, but he stepped back like she was toxic. Call us when you're ready to make this right, Patricia. Until then, don't. Over the next week, it all unraveled. The buyers threatened to sue when Patricia tried to cancel the sale, claiming misrepresentation and wasted inspection fees. Jennifer Kowalski dropped her as a client immediately and reported her to the real estate board. The investigation moved quickly once they discovered the forged executor documents. Patricia's lawyer called me on Wednesday. My client is prepared to return the rent payments in full and accept a cease and desist in exchange for you not pursuing criminal charges. The DA is pursuing charges, I said. That's not up to me. She's willing to settle, to make this go away quietly. She wanted an audience when she thought she was winning. She can have an audience now. By month's end, Patricia had lost her real estate license. The state board deemed her unfit to practice due to fraudulent conduct. She returned the $28,800 in rent, not willingly, but through a court order that made it public record. Michelle called to apologize. I should have questioned things. I should have asked you if you were okay. Some family members still made excuses. Aunt Carol sent a group text. Family fights happen. We should all forgive and move on. I didn't respond. Forgiveness wasn't mine to grant for theft and fraud. Patricia never apologized. Not once. She just disappeared from family gatherings, from social media, from the life she'd built on the appearance of success and control. I stayed in my house, my grandmother's house, my house, and I didn't forgive. I just moved forward. 6 months later, the house was mine in a way it had never been before. I'd hired contractors in March, watched them strip the outdated wallpaper Patricia had sneered at and replace it with soft sage green in the living room, warm cream in the hallway. My grandmother's bedroom, the one I couldn't bring myself to enter for 2 years, became an art studio, filled with afternoon light and the watercolor supplies I'd abandoned in college. I painted there on weekends, terrible abstract pieces that made me happy anyway. The office got a standing desk, better lighting, a second monitor for work. I took meetings from the same room where I'd found the will, and sometimes I'd glance at the desk drawer and feel a surge of gratitude for my grandmother's meticulous record-keeping, her careful preservation of truth. The garden took the longest. I hired a landscaper who specialized in restoration, showed her photos from the 1990s when my grandmother had kept roses and peonies and a small herb garden by the kitchen window. By June, it looked like it had then. Alive, tended, loved. Patricia had settled out of court in April. Her lawyer had negotiated it down to restitution, fines, and probation in exchange for dropping the felony fraud charges. She'd lost her real estate license permanently. The last I'd heard from Michelle, she'd moved to Arizona to stay with a friend, trying to start fresh somewhere people don't know. Some family had reconciled with me. Michelle and David came by for dinner sometimes. Uncle James had apologized stiffly for not questioning things sooner. Others, Aunt Carol, a few cousins, had quietly chosen Patricia's side, or at least chosen to believe her version where she'd been trying to help and I'd overreacted. I didn't chase them. I just let them go. It was a Tuesday in late August when Patricia called. I was in my office, reviewing code for a client project, when her name appeared on my screen. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Hello, Maya. Her voice was smaller than I remembered, uncertain. I hope I'm not interrupting. What do you need, Patricia? A pause. Then, I'm having trouble with the legal fees. From the settlement. I was hoping we're family. I thought maybe you could help. Just a loan. I'll pay you back. I looked around my office, at the walls I'd painted, the desk I'd chosen, the window overlooking the garden my grandmother had planted and I'd restored. I thought about the girl who'd accepted 30 days' notice without question, who'd started packing because she didn't know she had the right to stay. I'm not able to help you with that, I said, my voice calm and clear. I wish you well. Maya, please. I ended the call, set the phone face down on my desk, took a breath. Then I returned to my work. Outside, the late summer sun filtered through the oak tree my grandmother had planted 40 years ago. The house was quiet around me, peaceful in a way it had never been when I was living here on borrowed time, paying for permission to exist in my own space. Patricia had tried to take this from me, had succeeded for 2 years in making me believe I had no right to it, no power to fight back. But she'd underestimated something fundamental. I was my grandmother's granddaughter. Patient, meticulous, stronger than I looked. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's simply refusing to be a victim anymore. I saved my coat and got back to work in the home that was finally, undeniably, completely mine.